Hello and welcome to Sci-Fi Remote Assignment 11. This is the second part of Monsters Due on Maple Street. So for this one, you're going to be reading part 2 of The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street and answer the questions based on the text. So there will be a form at the bottom. See it down here. And you're also going to be learning about mob or herd mentality and relate that psychology to the script to examine character behavior and motivations. Now, we learned a little bit about that when we talked about conformity a while back, but we haven't really touched on it again, so you're going to have a quick video within your form also to do that. And the video for that, just in case you need it, is right here. So we are back for Act 2 of The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. If you remember from Act 1, the people were living this normal, regular, everyday existence, and then all of a sudden this, weird meteorite type thing flew overhead. Things started acting different or becoming different. People's house lights started going on. Their electricity stopped working. Their cars stopped working. Cars started mysteriously working. And then they sort of started turning on each other when Tommy, who's the little boy on the street, suggested that there might be aliens involved. All right, so now we're going to go back. So if you remember, under normal circumstances, all of this in black, in bold, are the stage directions. You would normally not read these out loud, but for the purposes of this assignment, I will be reading them out loud to you. I will also not be reading the name of the person who's speaking. I'm just going to read what they're saying, so you have to pay attention to that as you're reading along. All right. We see a medium shot of the Goodman Entry Hall at night. On the side table rests an unlit candle. Mrs. Goodman walks into the scene, a glass of milk in hand. She sets the milk down on the table, lights the candle with a match from a box on the table, picks up the glass of milk, and starts out of the scene. Mrs. Goodman comes through her porch door, glass of milk in hand. The entry hall with the table and lit candle can be seen behind her. Outside, the camera takes a slow pan down the sidewalk, taking in little knots of people who stand around talking in low voices. At the end of each conversation, they look toward Les Goodman's house. For the various houses, we see candlelight but no electricity, and there's an all-pervading quiet that blankets the whole area, disturbed only by the almost whispered voices of the people as they stand around. The camera pans over to one group where Charlie stands. He stares across at Goodman's house. Two men stand across the street in almost sentry-like poses. So Sally starts us off. It just doesn't seem right, though, keeping watch on them. Why, he's right when he said he was one of our neighbors. Why, I've known Ethel Goodman ever since they moved in. We've been good friends. That don't prove a thing. Any guy who'd spend his time looking up at the sky early in the morning, well, there's something wrong with that kind of person. There's something that ain't legitimate. Maybe under normal circumstances we could let it go by. But these aren't normal circumstances. Why, look at this street. Nothing but candles. Why, it's like going back into the Dark Ages or something. From several yards down, as Steve walks down the steps of his porch, walks down the street over to Les Goodman's house, and then stops at the foot of the steps. Goodman stands there, his wife behind him, very frightened. Just stay right where you are, Steve. We don't want any trouble, but this time, if anybody sets foot on my porch, that's what they're going to get. Trouble. Look, Les, I've already explained to you people. I don't sleep very well at night sometimes. I get up and I take a walk and I look up at the sky. I look at the stars. That's exactly what he does. Why, this whole thing, it's some kind of madness or something. That's exactly what it is. Some kind of madness. You best watch who you're seen with, Steve. Until we get this all straightened out, you ain't exactly above suspicion yourself. Or you, Charlie. Or any of us, it seems. From age 8 on up. What I'd like to know is, what are we going to do? Just stand around here all night? There's nothing else we can do. One of 'em will tip their hand. They've got to. There's something you can do, Charlie. You could go home and keep your mouth shut. You could quit strutting around like a self-appointed hanging judge and just climb into bed and forget it. You sound real anxious to have that happen, Steve. I think we better keep our eye on you, too. I think everything might as well come out now. Your wife's done plenty of talking, Steve, about how odd you are. Go ahead, tell us what she said. Steve walks toward them from across the street. Go ahead. What's my wife said? Let's get it all out. Let's pick out every idiosyncrasy of every single man, woman, and child on the street. And then we might as well set up some kind of kangaroo court. How about a firing squad at dawn, Charlie, so you can get rid of all the suspects, narrow them down, make it easier for you. There's no need getting so upset, Steve. It's just that, well, Mira's talked about how there's been plenty of nights you spent hours down in your basement working on some kind of radio or something. Well, none of us have ever seen that radio. By this time, Steve has reached the group. He stands there defiantly close to them. Go ahead, Steve. What kind of radio set are you working on? I never seen it. Neither has anyone else. Who you talk to on that radio set? And who talks to you? I'm surprised at you, Charlie. How come you're so dense all of a sudden? Who do I talk to? I talk to monsters from outer space. I talk to three-headed green men who fly over here in what look like meteors. Steve's wife steps down from the porch, bites her lip, calls out, Steve! Steve, please! Then looking around, frightened, she walks toward the group. It's just a ham radio set, that's all. I bought him a book on it myself. It's just a ham radio set. A lot of people have them. I can show it to you. It's right down in the basement. Show them nothing. If they want to look inside our house, let them get a search warrant. Look, buddy, you can't afford to... Charlie, don't tell me what I can afford. And stop telling me who's dangerous and who isn't, and who's safe and who's a menace. And you're with them too, all of you? You're standing here, all set to crucify, all set to find a scapegoat? All desperate to point some kind of finger at a neighbor? Well, now look, friends, the only thing that's going to happen is that we'll eat each other up alive. He stops abruptly as Charlie suddenly grabs his arm. That's not the only thing that can happen to us. Cut a long shot down the street. A figure has suddenly materialized in the gloom, and in the silence we can hear the clickety-clack of slow measured footsteps on concrete as the figure walks slowly toward them. One of the men lets out a stifled cry. The young mother grabs her boy, as do a couple of the others. It's the monster! It's the monster! Another woman lets out a wail, and the people fall back in a group, staring toward the darkness and the approaching figure. People stand in the shadows, watching. Don Martin joins them, carrying a shotgun. He holds it up. We may need this. A shotgun? Good Lord, will anybody think a thought around here? Will you people wise up? What good would a shotgun do against... Now Charlie pulls the gun from Steve's hand. No more talk, Steve. You're going to talk us into the grave. You'd let whatever's out there walk right over us, wouldn't you, huh? Well, some of us won't. He swings the gun around to point it toward the sidewalk. The dark figure continues to walk toward them. The group there, fearful, apprehensive, mothers clutching children, men standing in front of wives. Charlie slowly raises the gun. As the figure gets closer and closer, he suddenly pulls the trigger. The sound of it explodes in the stillness. There's a long shot looking down at the figure who suddenly lets out a small cry, stumbles forward onto his knees, and then falls forward on his face. Don, Charlie, and Steve race forward over to see him. Steve is there first and turns the man over. Now the crowd gathers around them. It's Pete Van Horn. Pete Van Horn! He was just going to go over to the next block to see if the power was on. You killed him, Charlie. You shot him dead. But I didn't know who he was. I certainly didn't know who he was. He comes walking out of the darkness. How am I supposed to know who he was? Steve, you know why I shot. How was I supposed to know he wasn't a monster or something? We're all scared of the same thing. I was trying to protect my home, that's all. Look, all of you, that's all I was trying to do. I didn't know it was somebody we knew. I didn't know. There's a sudden hush and then an intake of breath. We see a medium shot of the living room window of Charlie's house. The window is not lit, but suddenly the house lights come on behind it. Charlie? Charlie? The lights just went on in your house. Why did the lights just go on? What about it, Charlie? How come you're the only one with lights now? That's what I'd like to know. Pause as they all stare toward Charlie. You were so quick to kill, Charlie, and you were so quick to tell us who we had to be careful of. Well, maybe you had to kill. Maybe Peter there was trying to tell us something. Maybe he'd found out something and came back to us. Who were there was amongst us we should watch out for. Charlie backs away from the group, his eyes wide with fright. No, it's nothing of the sort. I don't know why the lights are on. I swear I don't. Somebody's pulling a gag or something. He bumps against Steve, who grabs him and whirls him around. A gag? A gag? Charlie, there's a dead man on the sidewalk, and you killed him. Does this thing look like a gag to you? No, please. A man breaks away from the crowd to chase Charlie. As the man tackles him and lands on top of him, the other people start to run toward them. Charlie is up on his feet, breaks away from the other man's grasp, lands a couple of desperate punches that push the men aside. He then forces his way, fighting through the crowd, to once again break free, jumps up on his front porch. On the front porch, as a rock thrown from the group smashes a window alongside him, the broken glass flying past him, a couple of pieces cutting him. He stands there perspiring, rumpled, blood running down from a cut on the cheek. His wife breaks away from the group to throw herself into his arms. He buries his face against her. We can see the crowd converging on the porch now. It must have been him. He's the one. We gotta get Charlie. Another rock lands on the porch. Now Charlie pushes his wife behind him, facing the group. So this crowd is so crazed at this point that they're willing to kill Charlie, even though they don't know what's going on. They assume that because he killed somebody else, there must be some reason behind it other than fear. All right, so that fear caused him to kill someone. This fear is causing this mob to turn on Charlie and his wife. His wife hasn't done anything, yet they're still going to turn on her as well. Look, I swear to you, it isn't me, but I do know who it is. I swear to you, I do know who it is. I know who the monster is here. I know who it is that doesn't belong. I swear to you, I know. What are you waiting for? Come on, Charlie, come on. Who is it, Charlie? Tell us. All right. Charlie, let's hear it. Charlie's eyes darting around wildly. It's, go ahead, Charlie, tell us. It's the kid, it's Tommy, he's the one. There's a gasp from the crowd as we cut to a shot of Sally holding her son Tommy. The boy at first doesn't understand, and then realizing the eyes are all on him, buries his face against his mother. That's crazy, he's a little boy. But he knew. He was the only one who knew. He told us all about it. Well, how did he know? How could he have known? The various people take this up and repeat the questions aloud, registering fear, hate, bewilderment. How could he know? Who told him? Make the kid answer. What about Goodman's car? It was Charlie who killed Old Man Van Horn. But it was the kid here who knew what was going to happen all the time. He was the one who knew. All right, so now you've got this hysteria going even further to accuse a little boy of being an alien or being a monster because he's the one that guessed it. And the only reason he guessed was because he was reading, science fiction comic books and novels and things like that. Steve shouts at his hysterical neighbors, "Are you all gone crazy? Stop!" A fist crashes at Steve's face, staggering him back out of the shot. There are several close-up camera shots suggesting the coming of violence. A hand fires a rifle, a fist clenches, a hand grabs the hammer from Van Horn's body, etc. Meanwhile, we hear the following lines. Charlie has to be the one. Where's my rifle? Les Goodman's the one. His car started. Let's wreck it. What about Steve's radio? He's the one that called them. Smash that radio. Get me a hammer. Get me something. Stop. Where's that kid? Let's get him. Get Steve! Get Charlie! They're working together! The crowd starts to converge around the mother, who grabs the child and starts to run with him. The crowd starts to follow at first, walking fast and then running after him. We see a full shot of the street as suddenly Charlie's lights go off and the lights in another house go on. They stay on for a moment, and then from across the street other lights go on and then off again. It isn't the kid. It's Bob Weaver's house. It isn't Bob Weaver's house. It's Don Martin's place. I tell you, it's the kid. It's Charlie. He's the one. We move to a series of close-ups of various people as they shout, accuse, scream, interspersing these shots with shots of houses as the lights go on and off, and then slowly in the middle of this nightmarish morass of sight and sound, the camera starts to pull away until we've reached the opening shot, looking at Maple Street's sign from high above. The camera continues to move away until we dissolve to a shot looking toward a metal spacecraft which sits shrouded in darkness. An open door throws out a beam of light. From the illuminated interior, two figures silhouetted against the bright lights appear. We get only a vague feeling of form, but nothing more explicit than that. Understand the procedure now? Just stop a few of their machines and radios and televisions and lawnmowers and throw them into darkness for a few hours, and then you just sit back and watch the pattern. And this pattern is always the same? With a few variations. They pick the most dangerous enemy they can find, and it's themselves. And all we need to do is sit back and watch. Then I take it this place, this Maple Street, is not unique? By no means. Their world is full of Maple Streets, and we'll go from one to the other and let them destroy themselves. One to the other, one to the other, one to the other. Now the camera pans up for a shot of the starry sky, and over this we hear the narrator's voice. The tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices, to be found only in the minds of men. For the record, prejudices can kill and suspicion can destroy, and a thoughtless, frightened search for a scapegoat has a fallout all of its own for the children yet unborn. And the pity of it is that these things cannot be confined to the Twilight Zone. All right. So basically, they're implying that there's aliens here, but that those aliens are just there to stir up trouble and then watch everyone go against each other. It's almost entertainment for them. It's an experiment for them. And they're basically saying that they've done this in many other places, and it always goes exactly the same. Because when, humans become prejudiced, fear takes over, and the mob mind and that mob mentality, then people become very dangerous. All right. Now, this ending is slightly different in the video version that you will watch next week, and almost a little more sinister. So I'm anxious to see how you guys will react to the video when you watch it next week. All right, guys, have a wonderful day. Don't forget to answer the questions on your form and watch the video that's in that. It's about 2 minutes long. It doesn't take long to get through it all. Please get this in as soon as possible, but this assignment will be open until the end of the quarter, which is April 16th. All right, guys, have a wonderful day.